What makes your ideal clients buy? What marketing assumptions are you making that are wrong? And what are the 10 most powerful things you can do to get sales? Well, you're about to find out. Welcome to the Clients from Content podcast. My guest today is Katelyn Bourgoin. Katelyn is a buyer psychology geek and the founder of Why We Buy. She helps marketers and entrepreneurs to get unstuck and drive more sales using the science of attention and persuasion. She is someone I've been trying to get on the show for a while, and I am so thrilled that we actually made it happen. And her bio way undersells the empire that she has built, which is proof that she knows what she's talking about in terms of how to get people to buy. So, Katelyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
I am super excited. And this is, by the way, for anyone that's listening, this is going to be a flip the script episode. So normally people come on and ask me questions. Every once in a while, I find someone like Katelyn who is way smarter than me, and I bring her on so I can steal all of her knowledge and share it with you guys. So that's what we're going to do. And we'll dive right into it. I have some questions I can't wait to hear you talk about. So the first one is, I know you're a big proponent of what I'll call customer discovery calls, but I'm curious to hear what you call them and how we should define it. But basically, it's audience and customer research calls and interviews. So let's start there. So for someone who's never done a customer discovery call before, what are some of the best practices that you'd recommend? And then after that, we'll get into some specific questions that they may want to ask. But let's start with, in your mind, how do you think about customer discovery calls, and what are the best practices for someone that wants to start doing them?
That's an excellent question. And I'll kick things off by saying what I call them are clarity calls. And the reason I call them that came from, of course, doing customer discovery or doing, having conversations with customers. And so I started off working a lot with early stage tech companies. And so customer discovery is this kind of a very understood space in the product development journey, where it's like, first you figure out what customers want, and then you go out and try to build a thing. And then you do customer development where you continue to iterate your thing. And so there was a lot of folks outside of that space that didn't know what customer discovery was. And the people inside of that space thought, this is the only thing you use to build a product. It's focused on building a product. And it's so powerful for marketing. So I knew I needed a better term. I wanted to come up with something that felt like it actually addressed the pain, which is, I don't know what the F to do. Maybe that means I don't know why our product's not working, or I'm not sure that I'm building the right thing, or more to this, how I apply it. I'm trying to figure out how to have the right messaging and marketing to actually drive growth. And so clarity calls just fit a lot better. So I call them clarity calls. And when it comes to how to do them, people go into these, and if you've never done one before, it can be a bit nerve-wracking. And you think that you have to have all the right questions, and that there's a very specific way kind of to have the conversation. A lot of folks worry that it's going to feel like, for the recipient, one of those, telemarketer surveys that you get, and that they're just going to run through a range of questions with you. It shouldn't feel like that at all. It should feel like the conversation, and it should be a conversation around the buyer's behavior. Ideally, you're talking to somebody who has bought from you, because of course you're going to get the most contextual insights about your product by learning from your own customers. But you can also talk to people who have bought from a competitor, direct competitor, someone that does the same thing the same way you do, indirect competitor, somebody who solves a similar problem, maybe in a totally different way. So if you're a copywriter, you could talk to somebody who's hired another copywriter, or you could talk to somebody who's invested in copywriting courses, and you could learn a lot from those conversations. And then the third best option is somebody who puts their hand up and says, I have the problem you solve, and I'm looking for a solution. Because what that means is they've been exploring. They've probably tried things. They've probably bought things that might look totally different than what you're planning, but things that can teach you a lot about what's needed and about how they discovered those products, which helps with marketing, and why they chose those products or why they didn't work for that, which is going to help you with product development. So it's all around understanding the customers. That's the most important thing. You don't go into this with this mindset of, I'm going to ask people what they want, because people don't know. They think we know. And they'll give you very concrete, specific answers about what you should build or what you should do. And they're trying to be helpful. And that stuff is all okay. And it can be, you can get inspired by it. But the real meat comes from understanding their behavior, what they're actually doing. So I'd say if you want to host one of these conversations, go into it with the goal of reconstructing that buyer's journey, because that's where all the good stuff is. That's where you're going to figure out, when did they figure out they had a problem? what did they think their problem was? What other solutions did they consider or try, and how'd they find those? Those are all ideas for channels for you. And then ultimately, once they chose the solution, whether that be your solution or they bought from somebody else, then it's like, why? What led them to choose that? Why they think it was the right fit? And what expectations did they have when they started? And did they get those expectations met? And if not, where did they fall short? So there's just genius insight along that whole buyer's journey. And that's what you want to recreate in your interview with them. So it's like you're taking them back in time and saying, I want you to tell me in detail about the first moment you realized you had a problem right up until, you bought from us an experience or product. And I want to fill in all those gaps with you. Let's do this. And like, we're creating a timeline, almost like a detective. And people like it. And it's really fascinating because they will often see that there was a lot going on that was subconscious to them. Like they weren't really thinking about it in that moment, but when they actually have to explore their thinking and kind of rationalize it, they're like, oh, I never really thought about this before, but like, I went and I bought these jeans at this like kind of like young and hip store. And like 2 months before that, my youngest child went to university. So I guess I was feeling a little old, like, and maybe I wanted to kind of like reconnect with myself as like my new identity before I became a parent. And now that I had time to reinvest in myself, I wanted to rediscover who I was. And it's like, oh my God, a marketer, your brain just goes wild. You're like, wow, that's like a cool trigger event. And like, that really tells us what the buyer wants and like how we can market to women like that have that identity and that message that's going to work. But like, they might not have connected their child going off to university led them to buy jeans until you help them discover it.
What I love that you're sort of saying here that I think is really important, because I think it's a trap that a lot of people fall into, is that you'll get to talking about the product and you'll get to that, but it's actually the least important part of the conversation, right? Like, I think you described it as sort of talking about their behavior. And I think this is the other thing that jumps out to me also, probably as a former journalist and person who's really curious in general. Like, you have to genuinely be curious and you have to genuinely want to know their story, and not just know, like, in your mind, like, I just want to get to like, why did they buy or not? You have to want to understand, like you were saying, the sort of full scope of where they were in the beginning and why they did this, that, and the other. And to your point, like, they may not know that. You have to sort of guide them through that and be genuinely curious to sort of help pull out from them the story and those observations. And that ultimately that, because your whatever product you're creating or selling or have or developing or whatever, can be tweaked and positioned in a million different ways, right? You can ultimately, you're going to hopefully get enough good information from these people in these interviews that you can then match what you have to the things that they're actually feeling and needing, and not necessarily even knowing that they need. And I think when people hear these terms, especially if they haven't done it or they haven't sort of studied how to do it or any of it, I don't think they think about any of that. I think they think it's like, tell me what you like about my product.
That's exactly it. And they tell me what you like about my product. And also they often go into it looking to validate what they already want to do, which is the mistake that I made. So the reason I'm so nerdy about this is previous to doing what I'm doing now, I had started a tech company, raised venture capital, Inc. said we were building the next LinkedIn for women. Everybody thought from the outside we were crushing it. Spoiler alert, we were not. Things were not working. We did not have what they call in the tech world product market fit. We had built the wrong thing for the wrong people. But I had done lots of customer discovery. I was so proud of it. When I would like pitch investors, I'd been like, I've done 100 customer discovery calls, and that's why we're going in this direction. I felt really confident. And then I realized after the fact, I was unfortunate enough to discover this after the fact, fortunate enough to discover it at all. But I learned about jobs to be done and jobs theory, which we can talk a little bit about because it's really the foundation of the way that.
Yeah, let's talk about that now, because I'm sure there's people who are like, wait, what's that? I haven't heard that term. So
totally. So jobs to be done is a theory that explains why people switch from the current product that they're using to get a job done, or why they suddenly need a new product because they have a new job they're trying to get done. And it's just this different way of thinking about consumer demand. And the original kind of like thought leaders around this were Clayton Christensen, who's very famous he wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, which was a book around like how do innovators keep innovating so they don't actually get overtaken by, new competitors and incumbents. And then he wrote The Innovator Solution, where he touched on what would become jobs to be done. And he did all of this work with Bob Mesta, who is really he calls himself a co-architect of Jump Speed On. But the theory is simple. Like, we don't buy products and services because of who we are. And we don't buy them just because, we're looking for a specific transformation, like which marketers love to say. Like, really, it comes down to, we have a job we are trying to get done, and we are going to hire a product or hire a person, to do that job for us. And if our needs change and the job changes, then we'll look for new solutions to hire. We'll fire what we're using and we'll look for something else. And when you want to figure out how to design better products, you need to understand what job people are trying to get done and how they're currently using your product. So there's this great example. Intercom became a really great poster child for the effectiveness of Job Speed On. So they started out, they were at zero in revenue, but they'd had lots of people who were using the product, excited about it, went out and did a bunch of research using this framework of understanding the customer journey, which led them to completely kind of upending and reshaping how they ran their company and how they delivered their value and their offer. And of course, now they're a multi-billion-dollar company. But they had this neat discovery when they were going to tech conferences, because they would see that people were taking screenshots. They had this neat feature that some developer just added. And it was, you could see where all your customers were, and it plotted them on a map. It plotted little dots where your customers were. And that was just this feature that Intercom had built. And what they realized was that people were screenshotting that and they were sharing that on social media as a way to brag, right? They built it thinking, well, people might want to see clusters of where their customers are, and that could be useful for sales and blah, blah. They hadn't considered, oh, this is a form of social proof. So they adjusted how the product worked. They made a share option where you could share it without sharing any of the customer's private information. And because they realized this isn't just for visualizing where your customers are. This is a way to basically show off or show that you have a lot of customers. And they see all these tech people using it for that purpose. So when sometimes you stumble into you get it right. And if you kind of reverse engineer it, you can say, oh, this worked because, in the case of Intercom with that map feature. But more often you get it wrong and you need to go and say, why isn't this working and what's missing? And sometimes it's that you've got a good product, you're not targeting the right job, right? You think the job, using customer discovery as an example, you think the job is, I'm going to interview customers to validate that I should build this product. When in fact, a better use of those interviews, in my experience, is for marketers to use them to figure out how to improve their messaging and marketing. You can use the same thing and adjust how you talk about and what the promise is, and it can lead to much happier customers.
Yeah. And I also think we're going to get to some questions that you recommend people ask in a second. But I think, another big piece of this is understanding, and I don't know, tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but I think one of the ways in terms of framing it for people is that your goal is to actually understand the buyer, not just understand why they bought the product. You're really trying to understand the person. And I think one of the ways to do that as well is to also talk in terms of alternatives, right?
Yeah.
So for example, let's say that you have a brand, you sell some sort of high-end clothing, like high-end jackets. And if you just went to somebody and you asked the question okay, well, why did you buy this jacket? Or why do you buy this jacket? And they go, their initial answer might be, I need a jacket. And if you take that and go, oh, our target buyers are people that need jackets. And if you go a step further and go, yeah, but why did you buy this high-end jacket as opposed to the other jacket? And then they start getting into, oh, it makes me feel like this. I want people to notice me. It's going to look good on whatever. It's cool. What do you mean? What do you mean it's cool? What you get to the real answer, which may be status or confident or whatever, which is really about who they are. But if you just stop at the sort of why did you buy this thing and don't get into why did you do this instead of the alternative, you don't get to that, right? And you don't get to the sort of who the person actually is.
Yes.
They're never going to say, oh, I bought it for status.
No. And the thing is, one of the things that Bob Messa talks about is he kind of thinks about it. There are different dimensions to a job. There are the functional dimensions, how does it actually work, right? So looking at a pair of jeans, I want them to be comfortable. I want them to be able to, maybe I want to be able to wear them with a particular pair of boots. So I need the leg to be a certain way. So there's the functional elements. I want a pocket that I can actually put a cell phone in, not like a sewn up pocket, right? I just bought a coat 2 days ago that I'm going to return because I didn't realize that they didn't have real pockets. I'm like, I need pockets. So that's a functional thing, right? But then there are these social and emotional elements. So social might be like, well, like I'm going to this event and I want to be casual, but still look put together, right? So I'm going to get dark jeans because dark jeans, you can wear them casually or you can dress them up. So I want to bring one pair of jeans on my trip, but I want to be able to wear them in different settings. So, right, that's a functional thing. But then socially, I want to be able to look polished. That's a social thing. And then there's the emotional element. Like I'm going to this conference and I'm going to be around all these peers and these people I admire, and I want to feel confident. So I want jeans that make me look skinny and make my butt lifted up. And like, so there's things like emotional piece. So when you think about a product, so often, depending on the type of person creating that product, a lot of folks, especially engineering or more technical folks, will think purely around the functional stuff. They'll get really excited about that. And then the kind of like, marketers or the more like the empaths in the world, they might get really excited about the emotional and social stuff and like pay less attention to the functional stuff.
Right.
And really, to get a product that makes people really happy, you need to be able to think about all of those dimensions because they all matter. And to your point, they matter as a comparison to something else. Because when it comes to solutions, once we have a problem and we're seeking a solution or we're using a solution, they're going to compare you to another solution. And it might not be something you would ever think that you're going to be compared up against, right? So right now, like we're thinking about, I'm trying to figure out, like I want to build like one predictable revenue stream that is really consistent. And as a creator, I'm sure you struggle with this. There's kind of a lot of peaks and valleys, right? There's like big spikes in revenue and then months that are kind of quiet and dwindling, and another big spike. And it's not as easy to sleep when your revenue spikes.
Not ideal.
Not ideal. So like I'm looking at assessing kind of like what does that, the newsletter sponsorships are good, like, but like we could probably be doing we could be a lot better at that. We don't have anybody internally selling them. We just kind of deal with inbound and work with you, third-party partners. So like I'm looking at a new solution. I could hire an in-house salesperson, right? I could find a, third-party salesperson and really make a great commitment to them and say like, I'll give you this like commission and I want like to give you an exclusive offer, but like make sure to sell me. Or we could say, you know what, we'll keep doing what we're doing with sponsorships. And instead I'll find a different revenue stream that I think can be predictable and consistent. So if you're the salesperson that I'm thinking about hiring, you're not really in competition with an in-house salesperson or an external team. You're in competition also with what's another predictable revenue stream that we can add.
It's so funny that it's right in line with one of the questions I always ask my clients, like in the very beginning when I'm trying to get a sense of sort of what they offer and what they sell and what they do is, right up front, like I'll say to them, I'll be like, okay, you help people get X result, whatever it is that they do. I don't care how amazing you are. There are a million other ways they could get that result. So, and what's interesting is I'll ask them, I'll be like, okay, if they didn't hire you and they wanted to get that result, like what else would they do? And it's amazing how often people have never even thought about it, right? So they're a coach or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, well, that person could buy a course or that person could invest 100 hours of their own time to watch YouTube videos and podcasts and learn or whatever, that they could hire someone else. Like there's always a way. You're never the only way to get whatever result they want. But it's amazing how often people don't acknowledge, to your point, that those other things are the competition. It's not, if you're a coach, the competition is not just other coaches. The competition is a million other things that can help people get that result. Or the person even deciding that they don't really care that much about that result anyway, right? Like doing nothing is also an option. So real quickly on the best practices still, I know that people are going to listen to this and be like, yeah, this sounds great, but like, how do I get anyone to talk to me and do an interview with me, right? So customer discovery call, clarity calls, whether it's existing customers or whether you're starting out and you're trying to research a market, any suggestions for what people can do to get someone to, people to talk to them, and how many do they need? Should they interview 3 people, 20 people, 100 people?
One thing that I think I want to make a note of is the way that you're doing your onboarding calls with your clients is customer discovery, right? It's framed to them, and I'm sure they're getting value from it in another way, and you're getting value from it as you're going to be working with them. But like you've also taken advantage of an opportunity to do customer discovery. So one trick is if you're already having a customer conversation for another purpose, we do, as part of our Unignorable program, we have a kind of like VIP tier that have one-on-one calls with us. Like we use those calls to help them with whatever their current struggle is. But at the end, I save some time to have some of these questions, and they love answering them. So I kind of double up that opportunity to also be a customer discovery call. So answer one is like, if you're already having conversations with customers in another capacity, think about those as opportunities to just like leverage those for customer, like, customer discovery purposes. Beyond that, I would say that there's a few different ways you can go about it. And it really does depend on the style of your business. So if you're selling, in your case, working closely with clients at what might be considered more of a high ticket, more expensive offer, then you're probably already having one-on-one. So just bake it in, right? Bake it into the thing that you're already doing with your current customers, or do a discovery call so they can learn about you and ask you questions. And that discovery call naturally be the secret to running these interviews in the way that you get them to recreate their buying journey is that everybody loves doing it because it gives them so much insight into the way that they think, which we're all super, like little secret narcissists anyway. But B, it helps them to answer for themselves. Like, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this. It kind of like reunites that frustration. So if your goal is to learn about them so that you can then sell them on your services, then it's an amazing way to get them to self-identify all the pain points that they have and go, wait, tell me more about your thing. Okay, so how do you solve that for me? So I'd say use them if you are doing a discovery call with clients so that they can learn about you. It's an amazing tactic to basically structure the conversation. So you're learning a ton about them, and they're also kind of like, so that's, the obvious ones. If you're going to do this separate, so you're thinking about launching something new, or you launched something, didn't get the response you wanted, want to understand why, then you can straight up reach out and ask people. And what I'd say is offer an incentive of some sort, right? So when I used to do this work on behalf of clients, oftentimes, I did it for newspapers and for SaaS tools, and like, don't give them a subscription to your thing. Nobody wants that. It feels like a sneaky sales tactic to like get them to buy, but offer them something of value that shows that you respect their time and doesn't make it feel like it's a, sneaky sales tactic. So oftentimes we would just do a Amazon gift card. And that was so easy because with Amazon, you can, like, if you're doing, in my case, I did larger research projects. So I could do, 20, 50 calls and easily just plug in 50 emails and just send off their gift card, right? And the client would just pay. So that's an easy one. When I was working with brands that were really focused on like, local, I would say like, what's your favorite local business? And we'd get them a gift card for that. So again, it's like giving some type of incentive, and it doesn't need to be big. It can be $20 incentive, but it shows them that you care about their time, that, that you're valuing it, and people are busy. And when you do, and the other thing that I'll frame for like people who are busy and typically would charge a lot for their time, which might be the case with a lot of the types of people that you want to talk to, right? They're expert. They charge a lot of money for their time. I'll often offer a donation to their favorite charity. And then it feels kind of altruistic, right? So it's like, okay, like,
and then they almost feel guilty for saying no.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like suddenly they're denying the charity money.
But it's a little bit sneaky, but it's a win-win-win. You get the information, they get to support their charity, the charity gets the money. But yeah, they feel like if they're going to be like, well, no, F that shit.
Right. Exactly.
It's their favorite charity, not like this charity that I care about and that you don't. So that's a really good one, a sneaky one that's effective. So getting them on the phone. The final one is, I would say, like, do like an escalating ask. So like, first get them to answer like a poll. And then after that would you be open to talking more about this? You can book an interview with me here. Right. So then it's like, once they're already in the active mode.
And then they feel chosen. Oh, my answers must have stood out. I'm special.
Yeah.
She wants to hear more of what I have to say. It's funny. I wasn't necessarily planning on sharing this, but it's so in line with what we were talking about before that I think I am going to share it just quickly. So one of the things that I have started doing is that when people hire me, the first email they get, the sort of welcome, and even before, like, I do a whole diagnostic with them, but even before that, I actually call it like the first lesson that they get from me. They get an email with 2 questions in the welcome email. And the 2 questions are, what made you decide to hire me now? And what almost prevented you from hiring me?
Love it.
They are, in terms of an easy, automated way to get a little bit of research, it's amazing. And I'm just going to read, like, this was someone's recent answer. And just to give people a sense of like what you can learn right off the bat, not only in terms of helping me understand where the person's coming from, but also in terms of like influencing my messaging and for other people. So, so he signed up to become a client. I said, what made you decide to hire me now? And here's what he said. He said, I went through Justin Welsh's Content OS system about 2 years ago. I've been putting some of the practices in place. My first phase of content creation was to develop consistency and just get some shots on target. Feel like I've succeeded in that. I posted on X or LinkedIn for 229 days in a row. I feel with a great base of consistency and some progress attracting an audience, I'm ready to start honing in on how to leverage this base of content and get it more aligned with what I need it to be to land more clients. By the way, side note, in case anyone doesn't know, my whole business is how people get clients from content. So far we're right in line. Then he said, right now it feels like my content is getting interest, but not working to get clients. That's where I need your expertise and experience. And I'm ready to get coached on how to move to the next phase of content creation. So a lot of awesome stuff there. And then the other question I gave him was, what almost prevented you from hiring me? And he said, it's always this, am I ready narrative? Feeling like I need to tinker with this or that before I dive into a process like this. There's always more to iterate on and improve, and I can get swept up in that before taking action on this.
Mhm.
That's so valuable.
Right?
Like, and it's like, to your point, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think when we do this kind of stuff and you see it, it's like they're writing the copy and the sales pitch for you.
Yeah.
Like, I can literally take that guy's phrase, I can literally have copy. It's like, do you always feel like you're wondering whether or not you're ready, feeling like you need to tinker with this or that before you like,
Right. I call them
it's right there.
fireisms, right? Like, or swipe
Yeah.
of copy, but like the things that they'll write. And we released a new product called Painkiller, which is all about crafting your messaging to align with the pains that your audience has. But secretly, that product is a research product. But guess what? I know from doing a lot of my own research, people are allergic to the R word. Research sounds long and boring and tedious. And people think that they can figure, what does research compete against? Like, it's not other research, it's guessing. It's copying what other people are doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The next technique or trying a new tactic. Like, so research, when you compare, do I go off and spend hours on the phone talking to people and then have to like analyze all these transcripts to find insights? Or do I just go and look at what somebody else in my space is doing and copy it? Like, one of those feels a lot more
Yeah. And I think, and that's why I wanted to share that, because I think for people that like, yeah, you can do these calls and all that. And I know people will get overwhelmed by it, but or it may feel more overwhelming than it actually is, but it could be as simple, and not even just with paid products, right? Like your newsletter, welcome, someone signs up for your email list and they could get an email that's just, hey, why did you sign up?
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And you will learn. Not everyone will reply, but some people will. And it's just a low touch, easy way to learn a lot. So before we move on to my second question, even though I've already asked you a bunch, I do want to get just 3 questions that you would recommend people ask if they do a discovery call.
So I have a product called the Clarity Call Cheat Sheets, where I actually give you a list of scripted questions, but I'm going to pull out kind of like the themes. So number 1, start with easy to answer things like, do you remember when you bought this product? Like, where were you? Things that are not emotional, things where there feels like there's no judgment. Because what that does is it gets them in the mindset of remembering things, and it doesn't feel like you're jumping right into the meat. It helps you to build rapport with them faster. So start with easy wins, easy answers, things that aren't going to necessarily take a lot of work or thought on their part or analysis to answer. So start there. And always where I'm most curious is, what was happening in your world that made you realize you had a problem, right? That one is huge, because that tells you what the trigger event was. As a marketer, there's a lot of opportunity to marketing towards trigger events. It tells you what their thought process was. They kind of talk through the scenario. There's a lot of good insight there. Beyond that, again, with this idea of like kind of like rebuilding the journey. So it's like, okay, so once you bought this product, what do you hope it would do for you? How might life be different? That's when they're going to start explaining the job that they have to get done, right? Like, what was it that they couldn't do before that they thought this product would enable them to do? And why did that matter? And then I have what I call kind of like deep dive questions, because, the whole idea of like, ask why 5 times, you're going to get to the real answer. Well, asking why 5 times is actually can feel pretty abrasive on the recipient's end. It feels like you're like looking for them to like justify themselves. So instead of saying why, what I like to say is like, interesting. Oh, can you tell me more about that? Or if somebody uses emotional language, so they say something, something was really exciting or something was awful, then you go, oh, like, it sounds like that there's a story behind that. Can you tell me more? And then you get this backstory of like, well, like with the person who done Justin Welch's thing, like before that, I'd like spent like all this money on this other course and it was garbage. I'm like, well, and like they'll tell you like the kind of like backstory, which is often where a lot of the goodness is. So asking them to go deeper without just saying, oh, and why, right? Because then it feels like they have to justify themselves. So you have to kind of phrase it in a way that invites a story.
And I'll share quickly my favorite question that I ask people in these discovery calls. And I know I've used some of yours. I don't think this is one of yours. So if I'm stealing yours, please say that this one came from you. I don't think it came from you. But what I will ask people is, so for me, the core sort of value that I'm offering people is I'm helping them get more clients from their content. So I want to know sort of what their current status of that is. So I will ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your performance of your content in terms of it getting you clients? But what actually matters, I don't really care what their number is, because whatever number they say, I then go, well, why isn't that higher and why isn't that lower? And that's the part that unlocks amazing things. Because they might say, oh, it's a 9, right? So in theory, they don't really have a problem. But when I say, why isn't it higher? They're telling me now the things, even though it's going well, there are still things that they want to improve, right? And and the part, why isn't it lower? Even if they say it's a 2 and I say, well, why isn't it lower? They're now telling me like, okay, there's some part of it that they feel good about. They might be wrong, by the way, but at least from their perception, there's some part of it that they feel like is working or not working. And that question, whatever the value is that you offered people, like ask them how it's currently going for them, and then follow up with why isn't it higher and why isn't it lower? And they are literally, especially the why isn't it higher? They are telling me, if you can help me do this, I will pay you money.
Yeah.
Like correct.
And the genius behind this, it's not like I like to caution people, don't go into this thinking it's a sneaky sales technique, but it's totally a sneaky sales technique.
Oh, I've absolutely had discovery calls that at the end wound up in sales.
Oh,
I wasn't saying
people are talking themselves into your solution, and you don't have to like. It's not a manipulative thing because like they're really thinking about, well, these are the problems, and here's why these other ways didn't work, and then they start getting really curious. Well, how might Josh's solution be different, right? Like how. Like, and then it also allows you to shape the message of the conversation. Because if they're saying like, maybe the thing that you think matters is like speed, right? You're like, I can get you from, get your first, client, like your first lead to like conversation funnel up in like 2 days. And like, maybe speed is not even a factor for them at all. Maybe their real problem they think is this. So it allows you to structure the conversation around what they care about. Yeah. Don't go into it just thinking it's going to get you sales, but it absolutely gets you stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And I would even, when I would do those calls, I would start it up front. I'd be like, look, I'm not pitching you. This is not a sales call. This is not whatever. And by the end, they're asking me to tell them about how I can help them. Right. So cool. So before
that's a signal too, right? Because sometimes the thing that they're describing that they're looking for is actually really different than what you do. And that can tell you a lot, right? It can tell you, oh, I'm not going after the right person, or, oh, like this is totally the right person and they're misunderstanding my message because they don't think I can do that. That's totally what I do, right?
Yeah, no, that's so true. Cool. So before we get to the next question, just a quick side note here. If you are listening or watching this, I assume it's because you want to get more clients from your content. I can help you do that. Email me at josh@joshspector.com. Tell me a little bit about your situation and your goals, and I will be happy to give you some suggestions. All right, let's get to my next question for you. So now I want to talk about assumptions, and specifically assumptions that marketers make. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are 3 assumptions marketers tend to make that are usually wrong?
I mean, I think that if you think about it at a broad level, that we make assumptions around who we compete with. That is often wrong because in the customer's mind, it's usually a much broader and expansive than we would expect. And if you don't understand who you compete with in the customer's mind, then you don't know how to craft the right offer and message. So I'd say the assumption around who you compete with is a big one. The assumption around who your best customers are. I think oftentimes as marketers, again, this comes back to like the very human nature, like of people like them. It's tribalism. It's baked into our DNA. And so if you ask a lot of leaders in companies who their target audience is, very often they'll say, well, it's just a younger version of me, or it's somebody that like has these qualities and they're like similar to them. And then you look at who their actual customers are, and it's not those folks. So like I helped a MarTech company like basically figure out who their real customers were. And they ended up exiting a year later. But like, they were like, this was like the big unlock because we've been trying to sell to these people and we built it for them, thinking it's for them. We're spending all our time on them. And then just by me like going and segmenting their customers and being like, all right, so who joined when, who's been here the longest, just looking at the cohort analysis, and like, and then having conversation with those people and then realizing they thought they were going after like, big companies with like big in-house and like complicated in-house sales structures. And in fact, it's turned out that it was like the smaller to mid-sized companies and it was the salespeople in the organization, not the marketers. And they thought they were selling to marketers. Like, it's just understanding who your actual best fit customers are. A lot of people, I think, get that assumption wrong. And often they get it wrong because the answer of who it really is an audience that they don't either understand as well. So it feels a little bit scarier, or it's not necessarily who they think is sexy and who they want to serve, right? Like almost every student entrepreneur builds a solution for students. And then they end up realizing the students have no money. And then they end up figuring, well, how can I use like
by the way, that's also a lot of people building solutions for creators before realizing that most creators have no money.
Yeah.
Seems like I always say like the sort of creator market, there's a lot of fool's gold because it seems like on paper this great, amazing market. But then you very quickly realize that, like, again, the vast majority of them can't afford very much.
Yeah.
Right. They're not making, the vast majority of them are not making that much money to justify, no matter how much interest they have in learning and paying and whatever. It's one of the reasons, like, I sort of shifted my positioning from sort of general audience growth to clients from content. Because very specifically, I want, and one of the questions I ask people initially when like they reach out and want to work, I'm like, what do you sell? Is it working? I will work with some people who are just starting out and whatever, but for the most part, it's like, I want people that, we can put gas on the fire. Two of the things I ask, I'm like, what do you sell and who do you sell to? And you have a sort of, even if it's small, like, you have a functioning business, and are you already publishing content? Because I'm not interested in convincing people to start publishing content. I want the people that, like, I'm publishing content, I have a product or service that works, but it's not what it could be. Okay, let me come in and let me help you take that to the next level, because otherwise someone that's starting from scratch, it's tough for them. I want someone like any business, right? And I'm sure you're the same way. Whatever they invest in me, they should more than get in return
100%
on that, right? And it's tough to do that if you're at square one and you haven't even started doing
100%. That's why with Unignorable, from day one, we were like, this is for entrepreneurs, not for wannabe creators, because there's lots of people in the kind of like audience building space that was selling the dream of becoming a creator. Most entrepreneurs don't want to be creators. I don't know about you. I don't want to be a creator. I need to recognize the incredible leverage of that channel for business growth. But I see myself as an entrepreneur first and foremost. And I am an entrepreneur that recognizes the potential of building a personal brand. And like, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are like that, right? They might enjoy creating content, but creating content is a means to an end to grow their business. Their business isn't content. And so I think that there's the interesting thing about working with folks like that too, is that like they have a lot of thought leadership already. They've been in their industry for a while. Like, they've got unique insights to share. Like, they can actually be thought leaders because they have thoughts that are outside.
They've done something.
Yeah.
My background is sort of social media and social media marketing. And, I talk about, as social media goes, I'm 49 years old. I'm older. That I had a 20-year, well, maybe not 20, but I had like a decade,
right?
I had a decade plus career before social media was around. So I think it's a differentiation point. And it's also, I have a completely different approach than I think your typical sort of social media strategist who, to be perfectly honest, is like, let's get you more likes. And I'm like, the goal is not likes or followers.
I mean, we can talk about that all day long, but like and I'm sure the people that are listening to this are the ones that get it. And I think that there's so much like, voyeurism for audience growth where it's like, this person is a huge audience. I'm like, yeah, because they talk about really broad mass appeal dream selling.
Yep.
So
yeah. Or the other thing you see happen all the time, and I'm not going to name names, and I don't want to knock them. A lot of them are plenty successful and making plenty of money doing plenty of things. But it's like, I can write the world's best tweet about a newsletter,
Mhm.
about newsletter growth. And that audience is tiny. That's not going to go as viral as the guy who writes a like, here's how to be a good dad.
Yeah.
Like, and what you see is I think those people that are playing the sort of volume scale game,
Mhm.
they start to get more and more into sort of general life.
They have because they get used to that addictive growth and the
Right.
addictive engagement. And also when you sell products that are around audience growth, the size of your audience is a big talking point. But when you sell, in your case, to kind of like, adjust the messaging to clients through content, well, there's a lot of friggin' people out there that have massive audiences that sell
Yeah.
audience growth that don't have a lot of clients.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. And the other thing too that I've noticed, I think I posted about this a few weeks ago. Like, there's a lot of business thought leaders that don't ever post anything about business anymore.
Mhm.
Like, this guy's supposed to be like a business expert or whatever, but it's
Guess
all
what?
about,
Their ghostwriters want to recycle their content.
yeah. Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
I
as
mean,
somebody from the outside who understands how this world works, like you can very clearly tell who's creating content and who's like creating some and outsourcing a lot. And like,
yeah.
and again, back to this whole like people who want to work with creators, like there's a gazillion ghostwriters now because they all think that
Yeah.
fastest path to riches. And guess who they reach out to? People like me and you who don't need ghostwriters because we already have a big
Right.
audience, but we have money to spend. Whereas
Right.
there's a gazillion people who don't have an audience that might actually benefit from working with the ghostwriter, but they can't find
Yeah.
people. So they
Yeah.
just,
No, that's so funny. I never
yeah.
thought about it that way, but that's
Mhm.
that's absolutely, absolutely true. So the other piece about assumptions that I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you is so like, okay, so we talked a little bit about assumptions they make that are usually
Mhm.
wrong. But what are three things marketers should assume when it comes to selling their products and services?
You should assume that people are going to make decisions on emotion and then justify them with logic. So you have to be able to appeal to both sides, right? And depending on who the buyer is, it's even more important that you understand their decision-making process. So like, years ago when they were working with like engineers from like Boeing and Tesla and like all like the way, are they making decisions emotionally? Absolutely. But is the type of copy that's going to work with, to sell a life coaching program, like that kind of like
Yeah.
highly emotional, like feel more confident. Well, that's never going to work with these guys. But are they making decisions emotionally? Yes. So what is going to work with them on an emotional level? Show how like a tool like yours has helped with like getting more peer reviewed studies under their belt, or the types of people that are using it are speaking at these types of conferences. So it's like, I want to be
Mhm.
seen in that space. Like I want to be seen as like the pinnacle of my industry. So like you have to understand that people buy with based on emotion and justify with logic, but the way to appeal is completely depending on what identity that person wants. So this is the big thing. It's like the best marketers sell an identity, and that's a lot harder than selling a product, but it's where there's a lot more opportunity. So thinking around like what is the identity that they want for themselves and how can I differentiate and offer that to them. So what was another thing they should be assuming? I think you should, yeah, assume that your people are going to buy emotionally justified logic. Assume that people won't do what they tell you they're going to do, right? So many of people are like, I hate when like marketing like this, like, like if you're using I hate pop-ups and I hate like, sales and I hate this and I hate that. It's like, yeah, did you buy? Like, do you buy when
Yeah.
like, yeah. So like assume that what people think they're going to do and their behavior that they assume is how they think and act is not necessarily how they assume and act, which is why with when I do customer discovery, it's so focused on the actual past behaviors, not on them predicting what they're going to do in the future. Because if you ask people to predict what they're going to do in the future, they're going to lie to you all day long, not intentionally, but we lie to ourselves all day long, right?
Yeah.
Every New Year's resolution is a lie. I mean, it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things and this is right in line with that. One of the things that I find myself saying all the time to clients is, they'll talk to me about stuff and I'll always be like, that's a false choice.
Mhm.
Like I've literally had, and this is one that I hear a lot of times, right?
Mhm.
Where they're like, I don't want to be too salesy in my LinkedIn content. I want to provide value. You can do both.
Love.
Right? That's a false choice. And I've noticed it over and over again in all kinds of different ways where they just have this thing in their head that these are two different options and it never crosses their mind that like, oh, you could do both of those things simultaneously.
Yeah. And this comes back to like, I think that an even more succinct way of saying like, by, selling identity is like your vibe attracts your tribe, right? Like there are people that are like total Mac tards. Like they've done like studies on like people who are like big fans of Apple, that like if you ask them questions about Apple, they answer in a way and parts of their brain light up the same part that when you ask like a devout, like, Methodist, like Christian, like about God, like the same parts of their brain light up. And then there are people who think that anybody who buys Apple is stupid and they're buying, marketing, and like, it's far superior to use like this operating, like, so like people are different. And so your vibe attracts your tribe, and you really need to understand how to be comfortable with not everyone's gonna like your stuff. And if you're trying to make it interesting to everyone, it's not gonna be, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of
Nor should
people
you
get
want it to
scared of
be.
that.
You don't want everyone anyway,
Yeah.
And also I love the, the vibe attracts your tribe. It's funny, like one of the things I always say is, you attract the audience you deserve, right? And so people will ask me like, are you worried about people stealing your courses or doing your things or doing your whatever? And I'm like, I don't attract assholes. So no. Like I've never had a problem with it. Like, no, I'm not worried about it. And, whereas I think you'll see other people that they're like, look, if your product, your thought leadership, your expertise is all how to cheat the system, don't be surprised when you attract a bunch of people that are going to cheat your system. That's what you're attracting. And you can argue that's good or bad or what. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do it, but like everything that I put out there is about being authentic and real and not chasing followers. And to your point, like I think both of us are sort of focused on content and creator stuff as a way to help and grow the business, not it being, followers and likes are not the business. So I don't attract people that are doing that, right? I don't attract anyone that wants to buy followers, which are fake, right? Because that's what I put out there. So cool. So let's get to wind this up here. My last question is a series of a bunch of questions, and it's going to be, doesn't have to be rapid fire, but sort of. I'm going to give you a bunch. I'm going to give you a bunch of different elements, and just give me your sort of single best actionable tip for each one. I love that. I've done this with some other people on different topics, and I love it because people come away and they're like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Okay. So I've learned so much from you and your newsletter, and everyone should subscribe to it. And all your stuff is great. And you've shared so many little things people can do to increase conversions and increase sales. So let's go one by one, and you can sort of give me a tip for each of these. So first one is headlines. What's a quick tip people can use to increase conversions and get more success from their headlines?
Make your headlines more specific and make them personalized. So like actually use a specific number or a specific date. So add an element of specification and talk about you instead of like yourself, meaning you, the audience. Like, so those would be 2 tips for headlines.
And also, along with talking about you, I would add to that, and I think this is what you mean, like talk to them as an individual, not as a group, right? So it's like, I always say like, everything's always being read by one person at a time, no matter how many people you're sending it to. Okay, the next one is, what's your best tip for calls to action?
Make the call to action feel like the logical next step, right? So if you think about the way if you think about a digital ecosystem and you think about like, what would that look like in the real world? So let's say that your offer is a community, right? So instead of saying, buy now, you might say, enter community, right? So it's like, cause like the door would open, you'd actually feel like you're like going into, so like, make the call to action feel like a step that translates to the outcome of the offer. So if you're selling a, a copywriting course, it might be like, write better copy, right? So it's like the call to action is the thing they want to do, but it also is an action.
What about, and your best tip for social media posts, or if you want to pick a specific platform, you could do that as well, but social media content, social media posts, what's your best tip there?
I would say looking at a before and after. People love a really compelling this and then that. So it can be in an image. Of course, you could have 2 things that you compare and contrast, or it could be like, I used to struggle with productivity. Now I get more done than anyone I know. If you can show a stark contrast between a before state and an after state, that often means there's an interesting story there and people will pay attention.
I love that because it's right on line. When I'm a huge believer, I always say like value is transformation, and what you're talking about is transformation, right? So I always tell people like provide more value, and they're like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, if you help someone get from point A to point B, that's transformation, and therefore it's valuable. If you don't, it might be interesting, but it's not necessarily valuable, right? If there's no transformation, it's rarely valuable. Okay, so now let's talk your best tip for social profiles. So bio, header image, pin
Mhm.
post, any of that kind of stuff.
I mean, I would say find a way to visualize social proof. So if that means it's a picture of you standing on a big stage talking, it's like, okay, this person is somebody who the people want to hear from. If that means showing logos of, publications that you've been in, showing the number of people that might follow you, because the first thing that they're thinking when they get there is, how's this person going to help me? And if they can see, oh, other people trust this person to help them, anything that signals that there's probably something that they can learn too. So we're herd animals. We like to follow the pack. So anything you can do, and if the easier it is to digest, the better. So if it's a picture of you sitting on stage, a picture, a testimonial from like a client, like a big impressive number, like, the number of newsletter followers, something like that, but like show that it's not just you that thinks you're good at what you do.
Gotcha. Next one, what's your best tip for email list or newsletter sign up pages?
It's a good one. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of obviously social proof is important there too, but I think it comes down to understanding the job that people are trying to get done with like a newsletter. Like everywhere you look, you see kind of the same call to action, which I had on mine on knowing that this is like a very popular trend at first, but it's like, become smarter at whatever, right? Like that's like a very common one, but you do want to think about what will people get from it, because if they don't understand that, they're going to leave. So like in your case, it's, get more clients from your content, you know, the only weekly newsletter that helps you get more clients from content. Like, so like what they have, whatever it is that the newsletter is going to deliver, make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, it's right in line with sort of how I think about it. And one of the things that I tell people is I think one of the traps that people fall into, especially with newsletter sign up pages, is their description of the newsletter is what the newsletter is about, as
Mhm.
opposed to what it's going to help the reader get.
Mhm.
Right. So it should be result focused. So for example, the truth is my newsletter is about content strategy,
Mhm.
but it's the point of the content strategy is to help them get clients from their content. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't say a newsletter about content strategy
Mhm.
tips. I say a newsletter about, getting clients from your content, right? So I think you'll see that all the time where, you see these newsletters and it's like, oh, it's about crypto, it's about AI, it's about
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, it's about,
Yeah.
self-improvement, or it's like, no, 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 not what it's about.
Yeah.
What am I going to be able to do after I read this that I can't do
Totally, right?
before?
Like build your crypto empire is a lot more compelling than the top crypto newsletter. It's like it might be the top
Exactly.
newsletter, but like what is it? Why should I care about that? Oh, I want an
Yeah.
empire of crypto, like.
Yeah, and you see that especially with stuff that actually is sharing like news, right?
Mhm.
Because they're just like, "Oh, it's news about this industry." Well, no, it's news about the HR industry. It's like,
Mhm.
no, it's news to help you be a more
Yeah.
effective HR executive,
Yeah.
right? Like that's a subtle
Yeah.
difference, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of AI, what's your best tip if you have one for anything AI related if you use it?
Like I would say the thing that I have found to be like you can build like I love building GPTs now. It's kind of like become a nerdy pastime for me. Like any new product that we build, it's gonna include GPTs to help the person either brainstorm more effectively or complete the task more effectively, because there's all like it's so easy to build these. What you need to have is kind of this three-part thing. Like you need to provide a like framework. So tell the AI what the give it the specific steps of a framework, and then give it examples of what good looks like, and then tell it how the output should be. So for instance, we built a really cool GPT that's part of the Painkiller product that is based on Eugene Schwartz. He's the author of Breakthrough Advertising, which is one of my absolute favorite copywriting books.
Mhm.
But he wrote that back in I think like the 60s or the 70s. So like he gives these 36 different styles of headlines, and all of the styles he gives examples from the like 60s. And so like a lot of them are like a lot longer than what you might use today, using language that just doesn't feel fresh. And so the first thing I did when I was building this GPT is I went in and it's like, here's Edward Schwartz's what are Edward Schwartz's 36 ways of writing a headline? So like they're these, right? And like, what are modern day examples? Take them from brands since 2010 onwards that fit into all those buckets. Okay, so now I have that list. Now I can use that document to build a GPT and say, here are a bunch of examples. Here's the framework. Now you're going to ask these questions of the user, and then you're going to spit out 36 headline options based on that framework. So look for frameworks that are already effective and working, and use AI to think in that way. But if you just tell it, write me a headline, you're not going to get a good output.
Wow, I love that. And are you building those GBTs yourself or someone's?
So my team does. I built the headline generator one. I built the 8 pain finder one, which I actually surprised me with how good it is. Because I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is good. But like, I have a team member, Jordan. She's doing a great job as a former team member of mine, helped us with some of the ones for Painkiller. She's big in the AI space. So they take like the GPTs we're building, some of them take a day to create. Right?
Yeah.
Like they're not like, I get really annoyed because I feel like there are all of these people who are like touting themselves as AI experts. And then they'll like give you a
Right.
prompt and it's like a 3-line prompt with like fill in the
Like,
blank.
give me a headline.
Like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's bullshit. It's like you
Right.
might get something good out of that, but chances are you won't. Like our prompts are mega prompts. Like we have like examples, we have uploads. Like it's just a much more in-depth thing, but the output is really much better. So
That's awesome. Really smart. What about your best tip for testimonials or social proof, either getting them or presenting them or anything that comes to mind in that?
So getting them, we incentivize people to get testimonials for while lifting weights and for Painkiller, and it works really, really well. So we offer them a bonus thing that they get from writing the testimonial. The testimonial, we want it to be a true testimonial. Tell us it sucks and you think it did, but like them helps a lot, which I really love that tool. They make it really easy. They've got a Zapier connection, so you can just kind of, once you get one, you can send them your thing. And for asking for them, I asked them a couple of questions. So like the one thing I'll ask is like, who do you think is a good fit for this product? And what almost stopped you? Like, what almost stopped you from choosing it? Like, what were your like limiting beliefs or like objections before you bought it? And what did you get from it? And so when you ask those questions, they think more around, instead of just saying, this was really helpful, or like they think more, and then it answers the questions that a prospective buyer has, which is like, that's a pain point that I'm having, or that's the outcome that I want, or like, yeah, I have that objection too. Okay, so they bought it and it was still good. Okay, great. So it leads to, we started doing this with Painkiller. It leads to longer testimonials than I'd been getting before I asked those prompting questions. So I've been looking at, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and trim some of them. Because just because somebody gives you a long testimonial doesn't mean you can't just say the best couple of lines, right? Like you're not changing their words, you're just reducing them. So
have you ever read the book, The Brain Audit?
No, but it sounds like something I should read.
You should absolutely read it. And there's a section in there about getting testimonials that's in line with a little bit of what you're doing. It's like 6 questions to ask. It's the best thing I've ever seen about getting testimonials. And one of the things he talks about is the first question he asks is, now I'm going to blank out on it, but basically he asks like, it's like, what obstacle almost prevented you from buying this? And he always starts with like the negative, which is essentially them speaking to the pain points that the people have. And so it's always like, I wasn't sure if this was going to be right for me, or I thought it might be too expensive, or I thought it might be too advanced, or I thought it might be whatever.
Right?
Yeah, you'll love the Brain Audit. That's like right in your wheelhouse.
And speaking of testimonials, one thing we have inside a Painkiller, which I think if people are collecting testimonials or if they have competitors that are, we've got a GPT where you can upload all of your testimonials and it will, we have one that like pulls out all the sticky customer language for you to use in your sales. So those are 2 different tools, but they're both bangers. So good.
Oh, nice. Email subject lines. What's your best tip for email subject line?
People don't like this one, but like your from line matters more than your subject line. I really think that there are people who send using the exact same structure. We really consider what the preview text is, but our subject line is always the same. It's just like whatever the topic is that we're talking about plus why we buy. So it'll be like, social proof, why we buy. And I think that as long as you can earn those first few opens, this works well for a newsletter. And certain people can pull this off, but then there's folks like Louis Grenier, who's a really great subject line writer, and he doesn't use that structure. His are always different. But I would say my first tip is the subject line isn't everything, right? If you are consistently delivering value and people get accustomed to opening your email, then you can have a bland subject line and still deserve those opens and get those opens. So I'd say don't obsess about the subject line if you are consistent in delivering value, and people come to expect that from you. But the other thing is use curiosity to be unexpected. Don't give it all away. Sometimes you might want to. So like if we're doing a launch and it's a timed thing, and like, let's say like we're opening enrollment for Normal. The subject line might be enrollment in unignorable is open, right? Like it doesn't, you don't need to get to like, because that people are waiting for it. They want to see when that comes in. But if it's not something where you want to just like be really clear about what it is, then use a little bit of curiosity, like use something ask an unexpected question, or just like, even like words that don't necessarily computer make sense, like in an interesting way. Because if it's just like, 40% off today only, that might work for your like super loyal customers. But if you're always doing sales, that one's probably not going to work, right? So look at something more interesting.
My favorite email subject line stat is the most opened email ever sent by Barack Obama's campaign was an email that came from him. So it came from Barack and was the sender name. And the subject line was just, hey. That's the most opened one they ever had, which is spot on. Okay, upselling. What's your single best tip for upselling?
I don't think that I do, we haven't done a lot of upselling, so I can't share like, this is what's working for us. I would say that it has to just be something that is in line with the value, right? So like, I think oftentimes people might have two products and like, well, I want to sell both of these. So I'm going to sell, if they buy this one, I'm going to offer them this one. Why not? Right. I think you can do that. Why not? You'll get a couple sales, but I think it's a lot more effective when the thing that you have, like you were answering one problem with one product that might open another problem that your other product helped them to solve. So thinking about it like dominoes, like make sure that your first product is going to get them a result. But then if you make another offer after that, then show you're going to get this result with this, and then you're going to have this new problem. And this will help you with that new problem. So that way they understand why they should buy both, as opposed to just like tacking on something kind of like not relevant, which I think is probably not as effective.
And last one, wild card, whatever you want. One tip that you love or thing that people probably don't know. Drop one final gem on people.
So if there's like one cognitive bias that is my absolute favorite, and it's I think a blessing for perfectionists like myself who like to try to get everything right, it's called the pratfall effect, which is the idea that we actually like people and brands more when we see them make mistakes. Like not necessarily mistakes that are related to what they're supposed to be an expert at, right? So like if you're supposed to be a mathematician and you like screw up a simple math problem, that's probably not going to get you a lot more likes. But if you're supposed to be this like brilliant mathematician and in your interview, you're looking to get hired, you like spill a little bit of coffee on yourself, that could actually make you a lot more likable. There's actually a study that had to do with people intentionally spilling coffee on themselves in an interview. So like, it's okay to make mistakes. People expect it. It makes you feel more human. It makes your brand feel more human. So when you go out there and you see all of these people posting about all of their huge wins on social media, and you're like, why don't I ever get that? Like, it's okay to share your losses too, right? I think Amy Porterfield says something really brilliant about this that I heard recently. She says, share your scars, not your bleeding wounds, right? Share the stories from things that went wrong where enough time has passed and healed and you have some perspective from it. But don't necessarily, if you're selling, helping people to, be more effective marketers and you have a flopped launch, don't go the next day and go, my launch flopped. Like that's not necessarily effective. But then like in 6 months time, when you kind of like taken the learning from that and you figured out how to kind of adjust for your next time, maybe your next one was better, then tell the story of like your failure. So it's okay to share your failures.
Yeah, completely agree.
And it's okay to make
Katelyn,
mistakes. It makes people like you more. So I always tell myself that because I have a lot of typos.
I remember one time I think I sent my newsletter and there was a link in it and it was a broken link or went to the wrong thing. I forgot to link it. I don't know what it was, but I got a bunch of people that were like, link's not working, link's not working. So I did a resend like that same morning, was like, oh, here's the link that's not working. Like the most clicks I've ever had on anything. Right. Because it brought additional attention to it. And they were like, oh, he screwed up and whatever. Katelyn, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Let people know where they can get your newsletter, which they absolutely should, and check out your other stuff, because I know a lot of my audience is now going to want to know more from you.
Well,
where should they go?
Get on the newsletter, go to learnwebuy.com. And if you want to learn, if you want to hang out with me online, I'm most active on X. I still want to call it Twitter, but I think we're in the X phase of life, and on LinkedIn.
Begrudgingly. Cool. And for me, my newsletter, fortheinterested.com/subscribe. Any questions about anything, email me at josh@joshspector.com. I would love to help you get clients from your content. Anyone that's still listening, but I know you've logged off because we've already done the sign-offs. So thank you again, Katelyn. Thanks everyone for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.